Welcome, everybody, back to the final day of SEC Media Days here at the Winfrey Hotel in Hoover, Alabama. I'm Mike Szvetitz, along with Collin Mickle from the Opelika-Auburn News. And Collin, the big story of the day, obviously, was LSU head coach Les Miles. LSU picked to win the SEC by a huge margin, which is obviously the kiss of death. The media has only picked two right in the last 17 years. But that wasn't really the topic of conversation. It was his relationship with our perceived relationship with Alabama's Nick Saban, and that rivalry there kind of stirred up some old flames and rivalry.
Oh, absolutely. You know, Les has done really everything he can to build up that rivalry and to get people talking about Nick Saban and his feelings about Nick Saban. And, you know, I think there's a calculated element to it. I think that, you know, this is something that fires up LSU fans. It gets them excited during the offseason. And, you know, it's a smart move by Les Miles. It led to some strange questions in the media room, but it was good.
Perhaps one of the strangest or funniest was who would win in a boxing match, Nick Saban or Les Miles. And it was kind of a lighthearted question. But, Collin, who would really win in a boxing match?
Well, you notice that Les didn't comment, and I think it's because he knows that he's really out of his league when it comes to Nick Saban. I wouldn't bet against Nick Saban in a boxing match. I will say that. He looks like a kind of a light heavyweight. He's got more reach than power, but a solid fighter.
It's a scrapper, definitely. The question was obviously with LSU and kind of the history that Saban has in LSU, and now is that LSU's biggest rivalry now? Is it Alabama, or is that Alabama's biggest rivalry now? I mean, because of the history.
Well, my gosh, in the SEC, it seems like every team has 4 or 5 rivals. I mean, obviously Auburn and Alabama is distinct, but the Auburn-LSU rivalry is huge. The Auburn-Georgia rivalry, I think LSU is the same way. They play Florida every year. They got Alabama, LSU-Arkansas. They play for the beloved Golden Boot. That's a big deal. Gosh, I don't think they win a boot for beating Alabama. But yeah, I mean, obviously Nick Saban being there and LSU fans' feelings toward Nick Saban and the fact that Les Miles hasn't given them a national championship. Yeah, there's a lot of storylines in that rivalry, and it's going to make it an interesting game for as long as those two guys are there.
Yeah, and fans just want to circle one game on the calendar. Obviously, you can't do that. Switching gears a little bit to my favorite, Coach Ed Orgeron went today with Ole Miss, and he's my boy. We a day apart on the birthday tip, which is happy birthday, Coach. You gotta love the guy for just his enthusiasm. As far, I mean, coaching aside, and maybe play calling, but you gotta like the guy as far as the enthusiasm. He's one heck of a recruiter. He's done well in a state that has got some football prowess, but gets a lot of its recruits taken out of the state by other schools. Talk about just the feelings on Miles. We talked a little bit, on Orgeron. We talked a little bit yesterday if he was going to be on the hot seat or not. What were some of your impressions, or what are your impressions of Orgeron?
I mean, he's an enthusiastic guy. He's a guy who is very invested, very serious about what he's doing. But you get the impression that he doesn't always think things through. He's not as polished as some of the other coaches are. He was asked about the kickoff rule, the new kickoff rule where teams are going to be kicking off from the 35-yard line. And, every coach who has been asked that question before talked a lot about how it affected strategy, and maybe you pooch kick sometimes, maybe you onside kick more. Ed Orgeron just looks right at the questioner and says, oh, I'm just going to tell my kicker to kick harder. I mean, it's a great response, I guess, but it's not it's not a traditional SEC head coach response.
It's not like Miles and Fulmer were saying, oh, we're going to sky some kicks and do things like that. Also, he told his players to run faster as well. Other than Mark Richt went for Georgia's head coach, also and Tennessee Philip Fulmer. We were talking in there. You don't realize how successful Fulmer has been. I mean, he did win a national championship, and he's also got a lot more wins than losses. But obviously, Tennessee fans, just like any fans in the SEC, when you lose 5 games back-to-back years, you kind of start wanting the coach to get out. But I mean, Fulmer, he's got a pretty good resume.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, the idea that Phil Fulmer's on the hot seat doesn't exist in the Tennessee Athletics Department, or they wouldn't have just invested another $4 million in a 2-year contract extension for him. I've always been of the opinion that once you win the national title, you're set. You can't can the guy who wins you a national title. On another note, I didn't realize until Fulmer said it today, 4 coaches in this league have national titles on their resume, and Fulmer, Spurrier, Meyer, and Nick Saban. That's not a bad total there. I mean, a third of the coaches have won titles, and Tommy Tuberville has an undefeated season on his resume, and a People's National Championship.
And you follow Tribune, National Championship, and Golf Weekly or Golf Digest, I believe. Let's talk about Auburn as far as the SEC, all SEC team came out today by the media. Only 3 kids on the team. Only one first team selection in Quentin Groves, defensive end. Obviously, that was a given. But then Jonathan Wilhite, a cornerback, is a second team, and King Dunlap is offensive lineman. Surprises there? I mean, was this about right? Obviously, the coaches' choices had a lot more people because there was 3 teams as well. But any surprises there with the Auburn folks?
No, I mean right now, Auburn is a team with a lot of talent and not very many stars. They have, in their star positions, guys are either coming off rough years like Brandon Cox had, or it's new guys like Brad Lester. I think, and I wrote on my blog today, that Brad Lester is going to be an all-conference guy at the end of the year. If he stays healthy, he has a lot more talent than Ben Jarvis Green Ellis, who is the second-team tailback today. But, guys like that don't have the resume to be preseason all-conference, which is, of course, one of the many reasons that preseason all-conference teams are a waste of time.
I guess all that matters is what you do on the postseason list, where you're at the end of the season. Well, for Media Days, that's it. We're done. 3 days are in the book, and I'm very disappointed that we have to leave the Win-Free. They're so good to us. But we appreciate you guys watching on auburnversus.com. Also, check out www.oanow.com. Read all our stuff. Check out the videos and all the highlights from SEC Media Days. And coming up during football season, we're going to have a lot more, so keep checking out the site. Thanks, guys.